months before the election in '84, when we won the largest majority in the history of Canada.
The event came just a day after former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien spoke at a party rally in Brampton in support of Liberal leader Justin Trudeau. I'm Laura Carney.
Now, it has been an aggressive and a volatile federal election campaign, and Elections Canada is assuring you that you'll be able to safely cast your ballot on Monday.
If someone's being disruptive at the polls, they will not be allowed to enter.
Aggressive protesters have been a common sight through this campaign, and while Elections Canada is sure voting day will be like advanced polls where it was a smooth process with only a handful of isolated incidents, it will be prepared just in case. Diane Benson with Elections Canada tells me returning officers will be putting in place measures to make sure when you cast your ballot it's in a safe and secure environment.
If we are at a school, that schools require a security officer on site. So things vary according to different electoral districts and different polling places.
It's against the law to interfere with the voting process or intimidate voters, and if necessary, Benson says local law enforcement could be called in if there are serious issues. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
City News Time 9:02, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Most areas will have sun and cloud today with the high 24 degrees. Tonight, mainly clear and 11, and tomorrow warmer up to 27 with sun and cloud. For today, the high 24.
And right now, 13 degrees in Ottawa. It's 11 in Smiths Falls. Dozens of Afghans and supporters at Parliament Hill demanding the federal government do more to get interpreters and their relatives out of Afghanistan. From as far away as Vancouver, these people made it safely out. They want the same for the rest of those who worked for the Canadian military, along with their family members brought to Canada. They say that Kabul airport is open and Canada should be lining up more flights to get people out. The group of about 60 say they're on a hunger strike now until they get some answers. Hamilton police say one man has died from gunshot wounds after a home invasion, a shooting, and a kidnapping, all in the same Hamilton home. Just before 3 this morning, a 63-year-old man was taken from the home after 2 other people who lived there were shot. The man who was taken from the house apparently was dressed in just pajama bottoms. Calgary police asking for help as they try to find a man wanted on several Canada-wide warrants. That's in connection to the sexual assault of a 13-year-old girl. 32-year-old Jesse Donald Hannon could be in Ontario. He's described as 6 feet tall, weighing 163 pounds, so a slim build. He has brown hair and brown eyes. We do have his picture up. You can go to our website to see that picture. Anyone who spots this person has to contact local police. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Good, bad, or complicated.
There's no news in Ottawa and the Valley he won't talk about.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Good morning, Ottawa, and welcome to the Rob Snow Show. Rob off this week. Derek Fage here filling in. Apologies if I've lost my voice a little bit. Doing a live auction last night. Feast of Fields. Raising money in support of Care For. What a great night. So it was just so exciting. I mean, it's the first event I've been where everybody was fully vaccinated. You had to show proof of double vaccination. It was a wine and food evening. It was a beautiful night. Raised money for a great cause. Got a last minute, hey, Derek, can you do a live auction? We want to give away this frying pan. It's been signed by all the chefs. I said, well, a frying pan, of course I can. I can do that. $425 later, raise some more money for Care For, and some banjo lessons. 8 professional banjo lessons. We auctioned off last night as well for another $400. Just an amazing night. So if I lose my voice, it's not just because I yell on this show. It's also because I have a career as a live auctioneer. And where do we begin today? Oh my goodness, where do we start? Okay, I think I know where we start. Let's start what's happening in Alberta. I mean, nobody saw this coming. No one saw this coming. My goodness. Doug Ford must have been sitting at home going, oh my God, thank God. I reversed my decision on vaccine passports, let me tell you. So last night, 8 p.m., Some big news, and you've heard it because I know you listen from the moment you wake up in the morning, you tune into City News until you go to bed at night. I know, so you've heard some of this already, but let's walk you through it. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney held a hastily scheduled news conference to announce that his government is abandoning their approach to COVID-19. There's a shock for you. With a population of just 4 million, Alberta now has over 18,000 cases of COVID-19, and they predict they will run out of intensive care beds in hospitals for the next 10 days. Why should we get vaccinated, Derek? I don't understand. If you've all been vaccinated, what are you worried about? That's what I'm worried about. What's happening in Alberta. So last night, Kenney declared a public health state of emergency. The province will be returning to a full-on lockdown.
Today, the government has declared a state of public health emergency. 2 weeks ago, we presented modeling on the direction of this wave. The high-end scenario of that model projected over 300 intensive care admissions by the end of this month. But recent trends show that we are exceeding that high-end projection and that we may run out of staffed intensive care beds within the next 10 days. How bad this situation becomes and how long it lasts is now up to each and every one of us.
And let's continue on. Most surprisingly, Kenney's government will be bringing in, guess what? A form of vaccine passport, despite having promised for weeks that the province would not do so. They are calling this I love this, because we can't call it a passport because we've promised for weeks not to call it a passport. It's not a passport. It's a restriction exemption program. Okay, not a passport. We're going to go with a restriction exemption program to encourage Albertans to get their shots.
We must go further in encouraging vaccination and reducing the chance of infection for those who are unprotected. That is why the government has reluctantly decided to adopt the restriction exemption program, a proof of vaccination program for participation in certain discretionary activities that have a higher risk of viral transmission. No one will be compelled to get vaccinated against their wishes, and a negative test option will be offered as an alternative. But with unvaccinated patients overwhelming our hospitals, this is now the only responsible choice that we have.
So Alberta, by the way, in case you're wondering where they stand as far as immunization goes, well below the national average with 60% of the population fully vaccinated compared to 68% across Canada. We in Ontario are at 80%. Let's pat ourselves on the back. Kenney has been criticized for his government's decision to lift most public health measures in July. Last night, he acknowledged that approach was wrong and offered an apology to the people of Alberta.
I know that we had all hoped this summer that we could put COVID behind us once and for all. That was certainly my hope, and I said so very clearly. Based on our analysis of other jurisdictions around the world with similar rates of vaccination, we believed that we could prudently move away from addressing COVID as a pandemic and towards an endemic. It is now clear that we were wrong, and for that, I apologize.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kenney. Let's turn our attention to the federal campaign. And on the federal campaign trail, while all that drama, or drama, if you prefer, was unfolding in Alberta, Conservative leader Erin O'Toole held a rally of supporters in Quebec. And guess what? A special guest was in attendance.
One day about 5 months ago, I had a call from Erin. He said, Prime Minister, I should tell you that there are bad polls predicting my defeat. We are getting negative media coverage, and there's grumbling in the party. What do you think? I said, Erin, I think you should be thrilled. And he said, why? I said, because that's exactly what they said about me 3 months before the election in '84, when we won the largest majority of the history of Canada.
I think you recognize that voice, everybody. That is, of course, the voice of former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, who joined O'Toole at the event last night to endorse his campaign. Mulroney spoke for about 10 minutes. Extraordinarily well received by the crowd of supporters, which is, Quite frankly, not surprising. And he offered, by the way, a few pieces of advice for Aaron O'Toole. I mean, you heard that piece of advice that he gave about 5 months ago, but he gave a few pieces of public advice for O'Toole if he goes on to become prime minister.
In the Fraser Institute annual Economic Freedom of the World report, Canada is no longer among the top 10 of the most economically free countries in the world.
Sound familiar?
If you want to look at problems that Aaron's going to have to deal with, our anemic productivity, which is the lowest in the OECD, this can only be corrected by strong leadership. And Aaron will meet these challenges as Prime Minister because his leadership is steady, strong, and visionary.
Now, let that just be an example of not only do city councilors listen to this show, not only do Ontario MPPs listen to this show, not only do federal MPs listen to this show, former prime ministers listen to this show. Because in that clip, you hear Mulroney referencing a new report from the Fraser Institute that found that Canada has dropped out of the top 10 countries in the world in a ranking of economic freedom. Guess what? We talked about that report for a half an hour with Professor Ian Lee on Tuesday. Great minds think alike. That's why you tune into this show. Best political show in the country, most entertaining. There is some debate about whether or not Mulroney's endorsement will do a lot for O'Toole's chances at the polls. Some pundits suggest it was just a way to match Justin Trudeau's event because, he featured Jean Chrétien, former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien, earlier on in the week. And we'll certainly get into that a little bit with our panelists after the 9:30 news. And then another story we need to direct your attention to this morning, and I will suggest that you have a look. This is your required reading, and I've messed up the paper, so give me just a moment here. Your required reading today is an article by Adrian Morrow, okay? Adrian Morrow. This is in the Globe and Mail, okay? Required reading right there. For those of you at home, there it is, Globe and Mail. All right? Right there. So what are they talking about? The United States, Britain, and Australia are creating a new defense pact meant to contain the military might of China. It is called AUKUS, which is named after the three countries' initials. However, it does not include Canada. There is no caucus or Kanaukus. We are completely out of this. This is raising the prospect that Ottawa could miss out on intelligence sharing between some of its closest allies. So what's the deal about? So this is going to allow the three countries to share more military information, some related to artificial intelligence, some related to quantum computing, which I have no idea how that works, so you'll have to look it up yourself, and some dealing with cyber capabilities, which I do have some knowledge of. AUKUS's first project, by the way, will be to build a fleet of nuclear submarines for Australia. Where the hell are our damn nuclear submarines? I mean, how many do we even have? I don't even think we have any that are nuclear. We have, I think we have 12 frigates, 4 patrol submarines, 1 Arctic and offshore patrol ship, 12 coastal defense vessels, and 8 unarmed patrol training vessels. So that's where we stand. We have no nuclear submarines. Now, before you panic, those three countries, along with Canada and New Zealand, do share foreign intelligence through the Five Eyes project. However, the question is, why not just bring Australia into that project instead of forging a new defense pact? It's a good question to ask ourselves. Spokesperson for Canada's defense minister, Harjit Sajjan, has said that the federal government had been kept in the loop on talks between the AUKUS countries. Oh, we're in the loop. I mean, we're not part of it, but we're in the loop. As I said, no caucus or Kanaukus, just AUKUS. In today's Globe and Mail, Eric Miller, by the way, a political and business consultant specializing in Canada-U.S. affairs, said the agreement represents an alliance between countries more willing than Canada to take on China. It is also important to note that Canada is the only one of the Five Eyes not to have banned Huawei technologies from its 5G network. I find myself reminded of this golden moment in the 2015 campaign.
And I want to say this to this country's friends all around the world. Many of you have worried that Canada has lost its compassionate and constructive voice in the world over the past 10 years.
Agreed.
Well, I have a simple message for you. On behalf of 35 million Canadians, we're back.
We're back, baby. We're back. I mean, we're not invited to the table on a few things, such as AUKUS, but we're back. Okay, let's quickly talk about the Talk Back Hour because it's Thursday. That means we have 3 election questions for you. This is our last chance to dig into the campaign with you before Monday's vote. I mean, we'll certainly talk a little bit about the election, I'm sure, in tomorrow's Talk Back Hour, but this is the last chance for your 3 election questions. So please give us a call. We want to know. In light of the news from Alberta last night, is it important that the next federal government set up a national vaccine standard for domestic travel? Okay? Next, is taxing the rich the solution to all of our problems? NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is enjoying a surge of support in the polls right now. His platform is entirely about wealth redistribution in Canada. Some say that growing the economy is a better way to fund new social spending. Where do you land on the issue of new and increased taxes on the wealthy? And lastly, what issue has not been talked about on the campaign trail that you would like to hear more on? Is it foreign policy, debt management, economic growth? Call us after 10 o'clock hour. Not before, after. At 750-1310. Get engaged in the conversation. 613-750-1310. Next up, Randall Denley joined us with his thoughts on strategic voting. Always a hot issue during a campaign and how it can affect the outcome of some local ridings here in Ottawa. Derek Fage here filling in for Rob Snow. You're watching on Rogers TV and listening on City News.
The Rob.
It started out with a small outdoor booth in what was called Artist Alley, which is actually the area just outside our store on William Street, where for a couple of years we sold our jewelry directly on the street. And then we slowly evolved to having an indoor location in this building, 55 Barwood Market Square. We then moved to another location in Place de Ville, and then moved back down here on Dalhousie Street at Irrigere in the 90s, and then back into this building again in 2000 as a collection. I do a collection of jewelry called Cirque that's mainly beaded work with a combination of semi-precious and vintage beads. And then she does a hat collection called Fanfreluche that's all cut and sewn hats in a variety of fabrics and for all of the seasons of the year. We've curated and sourced the artisans that we represent in a lot of different ways over the years since it's been, since 1985. Some people come to us since we're known, and other artisans that we represent might recommend that they come and see us. Some people we find at craft shows, or we see their work, somebody wears it in, and we go and track it down and bring it. And then some people, interestingly, are with us in one medium, and then sometimes they evolve to another. They're all Canadian and mainly local. With the roughly 50 people that we have, I'd say more than half of those are Ottawa-Gatineau, and then the rest are from other cities in Canada, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, etc. If you can afford it, go to a small business and spend some money. It's lovely when you come in and, give me a pep talk and tell me how much you love this place and you've been coming here for years. But if you can afford it, please spend some money too, because all the pep talks in the world are not going to pay my rent, which is still full rent even when we're closed. Then secondly, if you can't afford to spend money, follow the businesses that you want to support on social media. Go to their Instagram, go to their Facebook, follow their Twitter, and then retweet, share their Facebook page, like and comment, because if you can't afford to, as many of us can't right now, to do extra expenditures. Doing all of those little things like that will raise the visibility of those small businesses and hopefully for them result in some online or curbside or other business for them.
TV and City News, 101.1 FM.
And 1310 AM.
Welcome back to the Rob Snow Show. Derek Fage here filling in for Rob for the week. We are having a little trouble getting a hold of Randall. It's probably because he's busy typing away a new article on strategic voting. He's got a great article, by the way, in the Ottawa Citizen. We'll try to get a hold of Randall. But, we're going to go because, we have our finger on the pulse of everything election here on this show. We have noticed that Jagmeet Singh is in Toronto at the moment taking questions from the media, so we're going to head over to that media scrum right now.
Intervened, even though it's not federal jurisdiction, and acted to make sure Alberta didn't end up in this health crisis. As the decisions are being made, there were lots of warnings that this is where they would end up. Would you have intervened, whether that means using, invoking the Emergencies Act or something else? Would you have intervened?
We were open to using any tools possible to help and to support in the fight against COVID-19. The difference between me and Mr. Trudeau is that I believe that we have to play an active role and not to sit back and say our only job is to secure vaccines and that's it. I believe in a crisis, you have to find ways to help out, find ways to support, be more proactive in that solution, more proactive in aiding. The major thing that we could have done that would have clearly helped people, and what experts have said is one of the most important tools, is a paid sick leave program that's expanded and that works properly. We've been calling for that 22 times, and 22 times Mr. Trudeau said no. And the thing is, he realized that it was something that we should have done because he promised it in the middle of an election. So for 18 months he said no. 22 times he said no to workers, to people. Knowing that that is one of the most important tools to keep people safe, that would have helped in Alberta, that would have saved lives across Canada. There's many things we would have done differently. Paid sick leave, a proactive role in helping people get vaccinated, a hands-on approach instead of a hands-off approach, always working with provinces and territories, but being more proactive and understanding that in a crisis, it's not enough to just say, oh, that's my job and that's it. You've got to be involved in finding every solution possible.
I'll just point out, you didn't answer the question about the Emergencies Act, so I still put that out there as a question for you. But Kenny's admission yesterday, that he made a mistake, yet we have Aaron O'Toole, who at one point praised Kenny's approach and has not been as fully supportive of vaccine passports or mandatory vaccinations, certainly. Could you support a Conservative minority government if that leader is not on the same page as you in terms of vaccine passports and mandatory vaccinations?
Well, I'd put my position out there really clear. I believe absolutely that we need to get vaccinated. I believe in vaccine passports. We've seen how they work. But when we talk about leadership, the Conservatives have absolutely failed. There's no question about it. Mr. Kenney is a failure in leadership, and the people of Alberta are suffering, sadly, because of that failure. There's no question about it. But Mr. Trudeau is a failure as well. Let's not forget, he called an election. He decided, knowing full well, with all the evidence we had, there wasn't a potential fourth wave. There was a for sure fourth wave going to happen. And he decided to call an election instead of continuing to help people out. That is a colossal failure of leadership. He knew, because we all knew, experts had made it really clear that paid sick leave is one of the most important tools to keep people safe and to save lives. He would mock every time we asked the question, expand that program. Despite the fact that we are already put in place a federal program that we fought for and we said it's not working, he would mock those questions. 22 times we asked the question and he mocked it. And now in the midst of a campaign, he announced that he would do it now. That's cynical leadership. That's leadership that hurts people, and people pay the price for that leadership.
Good morning, Mr. Singh. Sorry if you've answered this question before, but you're talking about your affordable housing program today, and it would be paid for, in part at least, by 60 billion over 5 years in a wealth tax. The Parliamentary Budget Officer, when they calculated that number, said there would be a behavioural
This is the, by the way,
response,
National Post, John Iveson.
And discounted the wealth estimates of many of the wealthiest families by 35%. Why should Canadians have any confidence in numbers that look vague at best?
We are proposing things that haven't been done in a long time. but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. In this pandemic, we've seen who's struggled and who hasn't. We've seen that families have had a tough time, that people lost their jobs. We've seen that small businesses have struggled. But you know who didn't struggle? The billionaires, the Amazons of this world. The wealthiest Canadians, the 44 richest billionaires who increased their wealth by $78 billion. They didn't struggle. And for a long time, they haven't been paying their fair share. So we're proposing some real concrete measures that would end the loopholes, end the offshore tax havens, and the fact that Canadian companies that make profits in Canada hide that profit in an offshore bank in another country and don't pay their fair share. We are proposing making sure that they actually start contributing their fair share, and we know it's possible. It's not been done before recently, but there wasn't a long time ago that the wealthiest did pay their fair share. And recently, even Mr. Biden, President Biden, has put forward a plan which looks like he's copied a bunch of our initiatives because it includes change on the capital gains. It includes our tax on the wealthiest. And it is a direction that the world is heading in. We know that there is something very unfair about someone being a billionaire, being able to use an offshore tax haven or not paying their fair share. We want to fix that problem.
All right, that was NDP leader Jagmeet Singh getting grilled by John Ivison, one of our favorites on this show, on lacking details in his housing platform. All right. What does the Ontario political landscape look like? It's time coming up after the break. Ontario politics this week with Lindsay Maskell, Andrew Brander. We have lots to talk about with them coming up after the break. This is Derek Fage filling in for Rob right here on Rogers TV and City News.
In Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, September 16th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 15 degrees, and here's what's making news this hour. Liberal, Conservative, and NDP leaders all focusing efforts to win votes in Eastern and Central Canada again today. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh began his day with an affordable housing announcement in Toronto. Liberal leader Justin Trudeau is in Montreal. Conservative leader Erin O'Toole takes his campaign to both New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. While Ontario continues stage 3 of its reopening, one province is taking a giant COVID leap back. Albertans waking up today to a state of public health medical emergency as 18,000 people in that province are now active cases of COVID-19. Premier Jason Kenney apologizing saying they misjudged the situation. NDP leader Singh took a few moments this morning to address what's going on in Alberta. He told reporters in Toronto that the news is troubling and says he would push for military support. City News Time, 9:31. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Welcome back to the Rob Snow Show. My goodness, I almost got caught there for a moment. My goodness, I just went to get a quick beverage and David started flagging me down. Derek, what the heck are you doing? Andrew, you're supposed to string out that news a little longer. My goodness. Oh, boy. It's okay. I'm in the chair. I'm ready to go. Derek Fage here, filling in for Rob Snow here on Rogers TV and City News. It is time. Before we bring on our guest, let me just say, I think Dougie's probably feeling good this morning, okay? Doug Ford's probably feeling pretty good because things in Alberta, my goodness, despite having promised for weeks that the province would not do so, as you know, you heard off the top, Jason Kenney told a news conference a vaccine passport system will be brought in for some businesses beginning on September 20th. We may recall a certain premier of Ontario said he would also not be bringing in any kind of vaccine mandate or passport, and well, that changed rather quickly. Let's talk a little bit about Kenney's mea culpa here with our friends Lindsay Maskell, Liberal strategist and former advisor to Dalton McGuinty, joining us. Lindsay, how are you?
Good morning. I'm great. How are you?
I'm excellent, thanks. Great to have you, Lindsay. And Andrew Brander, senior consultant with Crestview Strategy and former advisor to the Ford government. Welcome, Andrew. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Derek. I'm all right. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. I hear it in your voice, Andrew. You know I'm coming at you first. Let's talk about Kenney's mea culpa here. Yeah. Is this good or bad for Doug? I mean, I think Doug kind of looks like Captain Conservative right now, right? Listen, I brought in my restrictions and vaccine passports. Look at me. Jason waited too long.
Yeah, look, Derek, I disagree a little bit off the top with sort of the assertion of or the implication that anyone is going to be excited about this news and this, the state of emergency that's been.
Yes, for sure, Andrew. I was being a little sarcastic, having some fun there. Yeah.
Of course. But I think that goes to say, though, that I would hope that no one's really dancing on any kind of graves here. I think the whole issue is become obviously so political that obviously these types of conversations need to happen. And so to answer the question directly, I think Ford and Kenney are very different leaders. I think Kenney is much more rooted in conviction,
right,
and principle. And Ford is, in every true sense, a populist. And I know we like to poke fun at it often here, the amount of walkbacks the Ford government does on a weekly, if not daily basis. But here is a prime example of where that manifests, right?
Right.
I think Kenney's example of a government that doesn't easily change its mind, and this is what the results look like. So yes, to answer your question, I think Ford looks more reasonable as a leader in situations like this, a leader who consults, who's able to acknowledge that he's not always right, and is able to take the appropriate steps to correct that.
Yeah, and Andrew, the only thing I would say there, and you can jump in now, Lindsay, is I would just say it's not just a matter of politics anymore either. It's a matter of health and safety. I don't think this was simply just a political move, or any of these moves have been political. Lindsay, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, you're exactly right. This is now, Doug Ford is probably very thankful he did the walk back and made the right decision for the health of Ontarians. And his only political calculus on this is, thank goodness I did this. I'm going to the polls in, well under a year now, and had promised that we were not going to go back into lockdown. For Jason Kenney, unfortunately, I feel like the rest of us, having seen sort of stampede of that, the doors were open and life was going to be back to normal, the realists and those of us that were watching this cycle through the states at the pace it was, with by the time people were refusing vaccinations and not wanting to wear masks, this was foreseeable, unfortunately. And so being that deep-rooted in that conviction against this, is definitely a political mistake. I enjoy the line that, it's an interesting province, and it's interesting as a Liberal that I do a lot of work in Alberta, actually.
Right.
And I'm always, I'm surprised that this is something that it feels, my interactions there, that people feel like this is something that they're so put upon. You've had a wonderful life if this is the biggest inconvenience that you've had in life in COVID. So Jason Kenney also has a caucus relations problem, which is making this more difficult in terms of, as much as that photo of the resistance we joke about, he also has the revolution he has to worry about in Alberta. So he doesn't have the tightest control or teamwork amongst his caucus and cabinet. And so that's the politics that probably clouded the right decision coming sooner. And hopefully we feel the impacts and save lives soon because of having to take this turn.
Lindsay, sorry, can I
go ahead, Andrew?
Jump in there? I completely agree with what Lindsay said on the caucus management side, and I think that's another contrast piece you can look at, and that sort of starts at the top, right? You recall that through the course of COVID, Doug Ford, the premier in Ontario, has had zero time for sort of this level of dissent that's come up. You'll recall, the Randy Hillier situation. You'll recall the Roman Baver situation. Mm-hmm. You'll recall as recent as a few weeks ago when he mandated that every member of the provincial caucus was to be vaccinated, and he lost another, Rick Nichols, a long-standing member of the House because of that. So, I think the leadership at that point starts at the top and setting that example and setting that tone. And that's something that, unfortunately, obviously, Premier Kenney doesn't feel like he has the ability to do out there.
Yeah, and I'll give him credit for that, Andrew. I'm glad you brought up those examples, and also that sure he has changed his mind or flip flopped. You can describe it any way you want, but he hasn't necessarily done so as reluctantly as we've seen some others, not just here in Canada, but around the world. I want to look at this from a federal perspective as well, and how this how it may affect O'Toole's campaign, because we've seen rumors on Twitter that Kenney was supposed to do this after the election and that the Conservative campaign is not happy. What's your take on that, Andrew?
Quite the contrary.
Okay.
To think that that this would necessarily hurt the O'Toole campaign. Sure, Kenney and O'Toole served together in Ottawa. They're friends from those days. And I'm sure the Trudeau War Room will be reminding people of that. However, I think the O'Toole campaign, for their part, has spent especially the last 4 days reminding people and doing a great job at framing the fact that this was an election called by the Prime Minister during a pandemic. It was only his choice. And I think any stories about pandemic mismanagement makes voters reflect on that question. Why are we doing this? Why are we in a campaign right now? And the answer to that is obviously, squarely at the feet of Mr. Trudeau. So I think that's going to be that's going to be the prominent thought that voters are going through at this time.
Yeah, and you know what I'll say about O'Toole is I found yesterday he went back to more of his measured responses, saying things like, I just want you to know my party has ground to make up for. I'm here to listen. I want to know your thoughts, your hopes, your fears. And the quotes reminded me of the O'Toole that was elected as conservative leader in 2020. So he's kind of gone back to, I found yesterday, that calm and more measured approach. But Lindsay, on this thought, about Kenny supposing to have doing this after the election, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I do think that it is, there is a base in Alberta that is going to be angry that they're in this position, and that does mean that they're angry at the Conservatives. So that does have a bit of a spillover, even though we like to think there is a differentiation, it's not. And there would be a concern that, we'll see in the next couple of days if Mr. O'Toole ends up back in Alberta speaking a little bit more like he was the other day. I think the message is often a little bit different depending on the jurisdiction. And there is, there's definitely a concern there. I think the good news for the Liberals is, of course, that they are on track to bring back some of those seats from Alberta. And regardless of the election, the hope is always that a government that's elected to lead has representation in every single province. So I do think that O'Toole potentially takes a bit of a hit for this in Alberta, and we'll want to see, that base will want to know, how is O'Toole going to be different? And unfortunately, that message maybe isn't the right message for trying to pick up seats in vote-rich Ontario and Quebec.
Andrew, I wonder, is it inevitable that O'Toole, jumps on a plane and gets over to Alberta as soon as possible?
No, I don't. I don't see that happening.
Okay.
Look, with respect to what Lindsay said there, I think she knows as well as I do that the Conservatives, generally, in a large majority of the seats there, win by such wild margins there. So what I'm actually looking for in terms of how this manifests on the ground in Alberta, I don't see it having a huge direct impact on the Conservative seats. What I do think could happen in terms of, as I said, how it manifests is further support for perhaps the PPC or the Maverick parties out there. I think this might be the kind of thing that motivates that protest vote to go out and be heard. Whereas before, they might have looked at the same thing I was just referring to in terms of, oh, well, the Conservatives, win the majority of these seats by these wild margins, so I'm just going to stay at home. I think this might motivate those protest votes to go out and have their voices be heard.
We're going to take a quick break here, and we're going to be back with Lindsay Maskell and Andrew Brander. And I'd like to come back to closer to home and talk a little bit more about Doug Ford as he remains in the Witness Protection Program lately. And we'll find out, just maybe how this is perhaps helping or hurting his image. So we'll be back with Ontario politics this week. This is Derek Fage filling in for Rob Snow on Rogers TV and City News.
The Rob
I'm blessed to be married to someone who is a scientist and spent a lot of time following what was happening over in China ahead of time. So he did give us the heads up that this was coming. Not that we believed him right off the bat, but when it did happen very, very quickly, we were prepared. We had hand sanitizer and we were set up to not close our doors. So we locked the kitchen down at Wellington Street, but we left this kitchen open. We put in protocols immediately. We only allowed our very small crew of 4 or 5 people in at the time. No deliveries were allowed to come in or out of the building without, they just weren't allowed in and out of the building. So we met them at the loading dock and had very strict protocols in place right away. We had masks and hand sanitizer and the whole thing. So we're very lucky from that perspective, and we're able to, learn as we went, as far as doing small, individually packed caterings, the frozen soup program, food for the Ottawa mission. So we didn't have to close the kitchen and then learn how to reopen it. We just were able to modify and shift as we needed to. Because of our partnership with the Ottawa mission, we were able to very quickly help support them. They were able to send us some product and some supplies, so it wasn't a burden on our business, and we were able to supply the staffing and the packaging to help produce that when they needed it the most. And we produced about 1,400 meals a week to complement their meals, and we started our soup program right away. We realized very quickly that there was a need in the community to get together and all work together, not only to support local, but also just to support all the people that were suddenly in a position of, being locked down and not being able to get out. So by starting that soup program, our community, our clients got online and started making donations for the soups, and we were able to produce the soups and get them back out to people that needed it. We're right now currently making 150 liters of soup per week, but we've made, I would say, 5,000 or 6,000, easily since the pandemic. Probably more. I'd have to do the math, but lots. I think everybody in the city has to be very aware of how blessed we were to have great weather this summer and people were able to get out and about, and that's going to shift. So we do have to be much more aware of who our most vulnerable is, and I really think we have to work together as groups. There are so many organizations in the city that are doing something and contributing and working together, and I think it doesn't matter who, but see what you can do to just step up and help them, whatever it is, whether it's driving or delivering food, or someone has extra zucchini in their garden, or if they can afford to donate some money to any of these organizations. I just think we all have to work together. We're smarter and wiser than we were the first time.
Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Well, I'm not that opinionated icon, Rob Snow. I do have my opinions, though. Derek Fage here, filling in for Rob all week long. We continue on our talk with Ontario politics this week, joined by Lindsay Masco, Liberal strategist and former advisor to Dalton McGuinty, and Andrew Brander, senior consultant with Crestview Strategy and former advisor to the Ford government. I wanted to come back closer to home. I mentioned Doug remains in witness protection at the moment. Of course, surfaced shortly to prorogue the legislature a couple of weeks ago and has disappeared again. He pops up here and there, but I'm wondering, is this sustainable? Is it hurting his image, or is he betting that he can get away with anything right now because everyone is focused on this ridiculous, useless federal election campaign? Let's start with you, Lindsay. What are your thoughts?
Well, I do think there's a bit of a strategic mistake if he is not out in the next week as we ramp up to a vaccine passport. You have the businesses that are, maybe a bit concerned about what this is going to mean for them in terms of the extra work and the process and clarity for that. And if you are the premier who's campaigning on open for business, being accessible and available and doing briefings about how you're there to help business, but also the fact that a vaccine passport was so wildly supported by the vast majority of Ontarians, that why wouldn't you make an appearance to take some credit for that? I do appreciate that he's trying to stay out of the weeds on and not be a player in this federal election, but it is going to be noticeable very quickly. And so I also think, if you've done something right, why wouldn't you come out and take credit for that? Unless he thinks that is going to hurt him so much with his base, which will tell us a little bit about how they're processing the move that Jason Kenney should have made. Well,
I wonder if he even should be commended for that, not coming out and patting himself on the back, Andrew.
Well, I won't commend him until that does or does not happen. That's how people get in trouble.
Right.
Look, to Lindsay's point on the vaccine passport, I think I completely agree, and I think we're going to see him do that. To the strategic point Lindsay made there. Maybe it is just a coincidence that the vaccine passport starts 2 days after the federal election. I'm not sure. Maybe there's more strategic thought there. But I do expect to see the premier come out, and do things a bit more publicly than he has for the rest of the period, starting as of next Tuesday, after the election. And to be quite honest, to your point, Derek, which is like if we look across the federation, across the country, the only times really that any premiers have been out, very, very publicly, have been in the context of some kind of catastrophic situation. So, while we can joke about him being in witness protection programs and things like that, I think that's a great thing. I think the fact that he hasn't needed or felt the need to come out to either explain a decision that he has made or, announce some kind of drastic new measures, he's in large part been able to defer to his ministers to make those announcements. And even on the vaccine passport thing, the province held a technical briefing this past week with stakeholders. They've been explaining things. The lead ministers, Minister Elliott, as well as the economic ministers, have all been out there consulting with people on this. And yeah, to your point, maybe they haven't been doing so in such a public way. And how refreshing that is in politics every once in a while, not to just seek credit for the right decision.
Well, if Doug Ford does something, or more often than not, perhaps doesn't do something, then Stephen Del Duca and Andrea Horwath attack him viciously in the media anyway, and then we set the cycle the next day. I mean, does any of this land on him? Do you see, who do you see as the stronger leader in opposition right now, Lindsay?
Well, it's been the interesting timing. Del Duca has had a wonderful opportunity of doing his regular press conferences and falling between the political leaders in the morning. So he's played this well by being out and by being out on the road in different ridings, engaging, but without having to, be the governing leader through this pandemic. But obviously continuously providing a policy alternative and a plan before this government has put out a plan. But I will say this, I would think this would, we would have seen Ford potentially a bit more had this election been going a bit differently. And we have seen that before where, Stephen Harper had the Ford name and the Ford brand that is strong in some vote-rich areas in Ontario out in an election before. So I just think this is a bit reflective of this election and not so much how things are going here in Ontario.
Andrew, what do you think? Is any of this landing? I mean, as Lindsay just mentioned, Del Duca is out campaigning, right? I mean, ahead of the June 2022 election, he's already campaigning, and hats off to him. I mean, to stay on top of people's minds isn't a bad idea.
Yeah, I think Del Duca is doing the right thing. He's making the right efforts that he needs to make at this point. Look, it's going to be, and we can look at the federal example on this, right? Which is for months upon months, Aaron O'Toole's numbers were not moving at all, and the second he was getting sort of that national exposure, the fair coverage. Or at least balanced, fair time that media outlets have to give leaders during election period.
Right.
You saw his numbers just drastically increase to a point where, if you believe the polls, he's pretty neck and neck with Trudeau. Is that going to be enough to get him past the post on Election Day? I don't know if he had enough time to play catch up. So that's why I'm saying, Del Duca is doing the right thing by trying that, but trying to get that attention when you're the opposition leader is a struggle at the best of times, even more difficult of a challenge for Del Duca because he's not in the legislature. And so I think, at least he's making those efforts at a time that is not necessarily easy to do so.
Andrew, Lindsay, always a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
Have a great week.
Thank you. You too. That's Ontario Politics this week with Lindsay Maskell, Liberal strategist and former advisor to Dalton McGuinty, and Andrew Brander, senior consultant with Crestview Strategy and former advisor to the Ford government. You know what's coming up next? After the 10 o'clock news, you're going to be calling into David at 613-750-1310. It's the Talk Back Hour. It's Thursday. That means we have 3 election questions for you. This is our last chance at our 3 election questions. Your last chance to dig into the campaign with you before Monday's vote. So give us a call, 613-750-1310. We want to know, in light of the news from Alberta last night, is it important that the next federal government set up national vaccine standards for domestic travel? We know, obviously, that it's there for international travel. We're talking specifically domestic travel. Next up, is taxing the rich the solution to all of our problems? NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is enjoying a surge of support, by the way, in the polls right now. His platform is entirely about wealth redistribution in Canada. Some say that growing the economy is a better way to fund new social spending. Where do you land on the issue of new and increased taxes for the wealthy? And our final question, what issue has not been talked about on the campaign trail that you would like to hear more on? Is it perhaps foreign policy, debt management, economic growth? You decide. Here on the Talk Back Hour. Coming up after the break, this is Derek Fage filling in for Rob Snow on Rogers TV and City News.
Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, September 16th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 15 degrees, and here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Facing the highest COVID-19 case count in the country, lagging vaccination rates, and a healthcare system on the verge of collapse, Alberta's Premier Jason Kenney has declared a state of public health emergency in Alberta. The Premier apologized for misreading COVID's predicted path back in June, but says he is not sorry for lifting all restrictions on Canada Day. That emergency in Alberta dominating discussion on the campaign trail today. Federal party leaders focus on central and eastern Canada. Here's City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney.
With the COVID situation in Alberta at a dire point, the health emergency in the province is taking a focus. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh placing blame for the crisis.
The Conservatives have absolutely failed. There's no question about it. Mr. Kenney is a failure in leadership, and the people of Alberta are suffering sadly because of that failure. There's no question about it. But Mr. Trudeau is a failure as well. Let's not forget he called an election.
Singh also says he would push for the military to be deployed to Alberta. On the election itself, in a one-on-one interview with the NDP leader, he suggests he'd be willing to work in a minority government situation.
That's our goal. Our goal is to get help to people. And we've laid out clearly what our priorities are.
Liberal leader Justin Trudeau is in Montreal today, while Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole taking his campaign to New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
Now, holding an election during a pandemic means political parties have to work extra hard to get their supporters to the polls. Strategists say fewer polling stations, long lines, and concerns about gathering indoors with other voters could keep some people at home on Monday. Parties tried to encourage core support to vote early, and they did see an increased turnout. 5.8 million ballots cast in the advanced poll, and a record 1.2 million people have registered to vote by mail. City News Time, 10:01, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Most areas will have sun and cloud today with the high 24 degrees. Tonight, mainly clear and 11, and tomorrow warmer up to 27 with sun and cloud. For today, the high 24.
And right now in both Ottawa and Smiths Falls, it's 15 degrees. A home invasion, a shooting, a murder, a kidnapping. That happened early this morning in one Hamilton home. A 63-year-old man taken after his two sons were shot in the home near Hamilton Airport. The father, 63-year-old Fakir Ali, was taken from the home just wearing pajama bottoms. We have this update this hour from Sarah Paris in Toronto.
The Hamilton Police Service has located a male with life-threatening injuries near Beach Boulevard in Hamilton. This man has been transported to hospital, and police are working to confirm his identity. But at this point, police do believe it is the kidnapped victim, Fakir Ali.
Now, police believe this was a targeted attack, but say none of the three victims was previously known to them. City News Time at 10:03. Two contest winners, a healthcare worker and their billionaire sponsor, are starting their first full day in orbit today, blasting off from the Kennedy Space Center last night in a SpaceX recycled rocket. They're circling the Earth now at an orbit 160 kilometers higher than the International Space Station. The Dragon capsule's crew includes a 38-year-old billionaire, Jared Isaacman, who bought all four seats on the flight, then gave three of them away as a fundraiser for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
On the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Oh, you heard it. There's the number right there. 613-750-1310. It is the Talk Back Hour. It is your hour. You, the listener. You, the viewer on Rogers TV. It's your chance to give me a call. Give me your thoughts. Being Thursday, of course, that means we have 3 election questions for you. This is your last chance for our 3 election questions to dig into the campaign with you before Monday's vote. Please give us a call. Here's a few things we want to know from you. Here's the 3 questions for you. In light of the news from Alberta last night, have you heard the news? Do you need an update on the news? Maybe you weren't listening to the news. Maybe you're just getting up. Let's talk a little bit about what happened at 8 o'clock last night. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney. The Premier acknowledged the situation in his province is turning out to be more severe than the worst-case scenario of recent modeling and said Alberta could run out of staffed intensive care beds within the next 10 days. Despite having promised for weeks that the province would not do so, Kenney told the news conference a vaccine passport system will be brought in for some businesses beginning on September 20th. These include restaurants, some events, and non-essential businesses. There are also new general public health measures for the province, such as mandatory work from home orders, mandatory masking in schools, and restrictions on indoor social gatherings. Even those fully vaccinated aren't permitted to gather. Listen to this. Even the situation is so dire that even those fully vaccinated aren't permitted to gather with more than one other person outside their household. Those not vaccinated are not permitted to socialize at all. Okay? So keep that in mind. So in light of the news from Alberta last night, is it important that the next federal government set up a national vaccine standards for domestic travel? We have some lines open, 750-1310. So that's our first question. In light of the news from Alberta last night, is it important that the next federal government set up national vaccine standards for domestic travel? Next question. Is taxing the rich the solution to all of our problems? NDP leader Jagmeet Singh was enjoying a surge of support in the polls early on in the election, but he's been stalling out in the last few days. His platform is entirely about wealth redistribution in Canada. Some say that growing the economy is a better way to fund new social spending. Where do you land on the issue of new and increased taxes for the wealthy? Final question, third question. It's 3-election question Thursday. What issue has not been talked about on the campaign trail that you would like to hear more on? Perhaps it's foreign policy, debt management, economic growth. You decide. You make the decision. I want to hear from you. Those are our 3 questions. Got one line open at the moment, 750-1310. Let's head over to Brian in Eganville. Brian, how are you this morning?
Good day, Derek.
Good day, Brian. How are you?
Oh, not bad, not bad.
Good to hear it. Good to hear it. Well, let's get to our first question. In light of the news from Alberta last night, is it important that the next federal government set up national vaccine standards for domestic travel?
Yes.
So sort of a pass. If you want to get on a plane in a contained area, in a contained area like a plane, you have to have a passport of some kind, a certification of some kind.
Yeah.
We have it for international travel, but we have yet to get it for domestic travel. So you're on board with that. That is a check for Brian. Next up, is taxing the rich the solution to all of our problems? You just heard NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. I was saying, enjoying a surge of support in the polls early on, but he's been stalling out. His platform is entirely about wealth redistribution. Where do you land on the issue of new and increased taxes for the wealthy?
It's never worked before, so why should it work now?
Well, and I wonder if it's a question of, we had Ian Lee on the show, Professor Ian Lee, and it was a big topic, right? Taxing the rich. It seems to be politically popular these days, but the professor's opinion, of course, there aren't enough rich people to support Mr. Singh's vision, and if you tax them to death, they're just going to leave. So
yeah,
it's
just going to move their money around. So, like this Singh is, he's a dreamer.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I mean, there's not a lot of costing in that platform. All right, last question. What issue has not been talked about on the campaign trail that you would like to hear more on, Brian?
Hidden agenda.
Hidden agenda. All right. So
now,
I don't think they're going to talk a lot about their hidden agendas, though, Brian.
I'm going to tell you why.
Okay. Fill me in.
First of all, Trudeau he's as sneaky as a snake charmer as there is.
Oh, yeah.
Now, he's learned from the best.
Oh, he's been listening to this show. Is that what you're saying?
Like his old man started with the wage and price control. Chrétien started with the GST. Then he went to the Red Book and he didn't give them their $10 a day daycare.
Mm-hmm.
He got sucked into the climate control with no qualms about not doing that.
The question on daycare, Brian, is can we afford it at this period in our history when we have historical debts due to a global pandemic? I mean, is it an idea that most people are going to get on board with that have children? There's no doubt about it, because rich or poor, it would be the same system, right? That's Trudeau's system, whereas for O'Toole's daycare system his system is more along the lines of income tax brackets, depends on what sort of rebate you get, I guess a tax rebate of some kind, right?
Well, he's not going to do it till 2026, so you can forget that one. Now, the hidden agenda.
Yes.
He needs the hidden agenda is called diversion politics.
Okay.
So he's got Huawei. He needs the majority to pass that. The two Michaels, they're going to do their 10 years. They're never getting out.
Okay.
You're not going to hear anything about those two scientists that he fired from Winnipeg. You're not going to hear any more about.
So those are issues. Those are issues
China's
that aren't being
building our
talked about that you'd like to have at least the opposition parties talk about, I would imagine. Brian, I appreciate the call. Thanks so much for calling in. Let's move over to Ed in Ottawa. Ed, how are you this morning?
I'm fine. How are you?
Excellent. I'm doing great, thanks. So let's go through these questions with you. Ed, in light of the news from Alberta last night, is it important that the next federal government set up national vaccine standards for domestic travel?
No.
No. Why not? I know it's a touchy subject.
No, it's not really. They've been claiming all along that airplanes are the safest way to be, that the air is super filtered in them. There's nothing really to worry about.
Well, for international travel, you need to be double vaccinated, Ed.
Yeah, but that's because you land in a foreign country.
Well, yeah, but if you're going from one province to the next, let's say you're coming from Alberta to Ontario, there's a big difference in the percentage of people that have been vaccinated.
Again, if you're vaccinated, what do you care?
Well, because you can still have COVID and pass it along. Right? I mean, that's obviously the argument from science and scientists and healthcare workers.
Well, that's a new argument. They've been arguing all along that we have to get the vaccination to be protected.
Well, yes, to be protected from getting severely ill.
Well, no,
right?
It was first sold as protected from getting COVID. Now, because it's demonstrated not to.
All right, well, we could argue about that for a while. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Where do you stand on the issue of new and increased taxes for the wealthy? Is this a good idea?
Nope.
And why not?
Again, like your previous caller said, they'll just move. They'll take their money and they'll move. It's a good way to make sure that we have a nice long recession.
Yeah, and something to think about. I'll actually play a clip in a little bit from Professor Ian Lee and talking on that very subject. And lastly, what issue has not been talked about on the campaign trail that you would like to hear more on?
Again, like your previous caller, the hidden agenda, although for me, the hidden agenda is the GST.
Okay, so, yeah,
They're called the tax and spend liberals. They've done the spending. Taxing the rich isn't going to get anywhere near enough money. They are going to have to raise the GST.
Yeah, you think to pay for this historical debt that it's almost inevitable that they're going to have to raise the GST?
Yes.
Yeah, and you wonder why the opposition hasn't looked. I mean, obviously, I don't see the NDP going after it because they would probably agree with.
Yeah, they'd raise it even more.
With it, but the Conservatives haven't had much to say on that. Would you like to see Aaron O'Toole turn his attention to that a little bit more?
Yes, I think.
And warn Canadians.
I think the other thing is this is the reason the election was called. If you're going to raise the GST, you want to call the election first, then raise the GST.
Well, that and you need a majority to do so, right?
Yeah.
Well, unless of course they like they have been, they negotiate with the NDP and the NDP agrees on it, right?
Yeah, they could have raised it, but then to go to election then, which they'd have to do in a couple of years, try to get yourself reelected after you've raised the GST.
Well, yeah, exactly, and plus two minority governments in a row, plus raising the GST, it's almost political suicide. Ed, thanks so much for your call. Really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. We'll review the questions in a little bit more detail coming up after the break. We do have a couple of lines open now. 613-750-1310. Should the next federal government set up national vaccine standards for domestic travel? Where do you land on the issue of new and increased taxes for the wealthy? And what issue has not been talked about on the campaign trail that you would like to hear more on? This is Derek Fage filling in for Rob Snow here on Rogers TV and City News.
This affected us big time because when, you know how we are seasoned, we have clothes for the spring, clothes for the winter, That time, lots of clothes didn't arrive on time from Europe or from here because some factory shut down. So, and this put us in an odd position. We received not all the merchandise, part of the merchandise, and people. And for us, we have to be careful, especially with the virus going on. Did affect the business, of course, like everybody else. We're not immune, and since the government helped, this did a little bit good for us too, but still affected all the sectors, especially clothing. You can see big corporation affected bad because nobody was thought it's gonna be like this. Earthquake might happen. We joke about it before. Think it might happen, but this was like a third war, but with a virus. So how to survive? That's the question, and we're doing our best to work with the mall, especially rent in a mall is very high. The government, they have certain, let's say, condition, like how many people will be in a mall or in the stores, etc. Yeah, it's a big factor, but of course, if my store has a back doors or just will be better, it will be much better. At least we can have curbside much easy because we have to shut down completely, and this left a mark on us, on everybody too. People always ask me, go online. Certain things you can't go online, let's say t-shirt, certain product people don't know how to fit. But when it comes to clothing, it's different completely. Let's say I have a customer comes, you can give him 44, but certain suit he might take 42, certain suit he might take 46. So, and how could, suit is not gonna fit the same. And I see people come back and they show me what they got online and not the same fabric. Mostly young people, but if you really want to shop, you have to go to the store because everything will be around you. You want to be sure the color look good, the fit will look good, especially when you spend, doesn't matter how much money, whether 300 or 2,000, You have to try, you have to see what's going on. Please don't be shy, contact us. It will be a pleasure for me to take a suit or coat or anything. Like sometimes people have a funeral, they have things, they have a wedding, they don't want to come to the mall. If I get all the information, I will go and meet them at their home or their business offices. I'm gonna start doing that, and this will help the business and help the people. Like they're afraid to come to the mall for time being, or they're too busy at work. They cannot go anywhere at a certain time, so I'm glad to do that.
Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
The Rob Snow Show continues without Rob. Rob off this week. Derek Fage here filling in. It is Thursday. That means we have the 3 election questions for you. We're talking federal government. Should they set up national vaccine standards for domestic travel? Where do you land on the issue of new and increased taxes for the wealthy? And what issue has not been talked about on the campaign trail that you would like to hear more on? Now, this is, I have some new information here. Aaron O'Toole. We're down to the final days, so now we're going to be giving away your own money, right? This is what we do in the final days in a federal election. What will we do for you with your money that you have already given us? We're going to give some of it back. All right, let's talk about what Aaron O'Toole's going to do, okay? Aaron O'Toole has just announced he's out on the East Coast somewhere. He's just announced a whole suite of supports for seniors in the dying days of the campaign. And this is an important demographic, right? Because as we know, this demographic gets out and votes, okay? And by the way, I'm not quite in the seniors category yet before I hear any smart aleck remarks over there, David. Okay. Through Canada's recovery plan, this is what Aaron O'Toole has to say. A conservative government will introduce the all-new Canada Seniors Care Benefit, which will pay $200 per month per household to any Canadian who is living with and taking care of a parent over the age of 70. Amend the home accessibility tax credit by increasing the limit from $10,000 per dwelling to $10,000 per person. Okay. That is significant. Allow seniors or their caregivers, including their children, to claim the medical expense tax credit for home care instead of only allowing them to claim attendant care if they live in a group home. Invest $3 billion over the next 3 years to renovate long-term care homes and improve the care residents receive. Double the Canada Workers Benefit and pay it out quarterly. This change would provide a $1 per hour raise for low-income seniors, including many who choose to work part-time to supplement their retirement income, and boost the number of personal support workers in long-term care and home care by providing priority and promoting these careers through immigration programs. Okay? By the way, Liberal leader Justin Trudeau is in Quebec. They have sent out a French media advisory for today. So we'll get to that in a little bit as I throw it into Google Translate for myself. I'm about a grade 8 French, so I'm not going to try to embarrass myself by going through this with you, okay? Jagmeet Singh has sent out, he's in Toronto, by the way, this morning. He's talking about housing, so I'll get to that. But I want to get to some calls before we get to some of those other, delectable items that they're throwing at us in the throes of the last 4 days of this election. Okay, our questions are: Is it important that the next federal government set up national vaccine standards for domestic travel? Where do you land on the issue of new and increased taxes for the wealthy? And what issue has not been talked about on the campaign trail? Let's head over to Thomas from Ottawa. Thomas, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. Let's jump into these questions here because the lines are lighting up. So I'm going to try to get to as many people as possible. So what do you think? Is it important to you that the next federal government set up national vaccine standards for domestic travel?
Absolutely not. We got a constitution here in Canada.
Yeah.
And part of that is freedom of travel. So if you start checking people at provincial borders, then you're checking people between cities, it gets real out of hand. And I think a big part of this question is, do we trust people to actually make a choice for themselves? Because all of this stuff about this pandemic seems to be about assuming that people are too stupid to figure out whether they should go somewhere. And, I've got to tell you, if we live in a free country, people are going to make that judgment call in their head. If there's actually a crazy pandemic and people are dropping dead on the streets, people aren't going to go travel to another province. But if people realize, oh, hey, this isn't so bad, it's just, the flu, and it's a little bit worse for older people, then people are going to decide to travel. So I think you have to leave people that freedom to make that decision on their own instead of turning our country into a big babysitting colony where the government decides what we are and aren't allowed to do.
Thomas, what if it was only for air travel?
Even then, only for air travel, but it's a slippery slope. So they say only for air travel, and then they move on to another situation. Then they say, people are traveling across borders too much by the cars. Then they might move it down to the cars.
Okay, so you're concerned that it would just keep growing and growing and government would take advantage of the situation. All right, on to the next question. Where do you land on the issue of new and increased taxes for the wealthy?
Well, I think taxation for the wealthy is decent enough. You just need to enforce it properly so they can't hide their money in the Cayman Islands and the Bahamas and all that stuff that they like to do.
Do you have any concern that billionaires, millionaires would start taking their business out of the country?
Oh, yeah, they definitely do that. If you look down in the United States, a lot of rich, wealthy business owners, I think, didn't Elon Musk, he pulled Tesla out of California because they raised corporate taxes and all sorts of crazy taxes in California.
Right.
And they all moved down to Texas. A whole bunch of business owners have changed their offices from California to Texas. Not to mention, now that work is remote, right? Everybody's working from home. I've heard of people now, and their companies saying, well, hey, you're working remotely in Canada. We can just get somebody to work remotely from another country. We're going to move our office to another country.
Yeah, it's a careful balance, right? Because other countries, we're competing not against ourselves. We're also competing against other countries. And if they're offering incentives, which are so attractive to businesses, they will leave and open up businesses in those countries. I'm sorry to say that's just the reality of the situation. Okay, last question. What issue has not been talked about on the campaign trail that you would like to hear more on?
Biggest issue for me, I think just the whole, like the main four parties in the debate, aside from Bernier, which they've excluded,
Mm-hmm.
None of them are really standing up and saying, hey, this pandemic isn't really as bad as people have said it's going to be. Like remember at the beginning, is it just me but at the beginning they were showing people like dropping dead on the sidewalks in China, and there were the white vans and the body snatchers coming along and, picking people up off the sidewalk. None of that happened. Nobody's falling dead instantly.
Not instantly, but I mean, you can't argue that people are dying, Thomas.
Yeah, but when you look at it, the people that are dying are extremely old and, and frail.
But do they not matter? Thomas, do they not matter?
It matters, but like my first point was, you got to give people freedom, right? Like if somebody is extremely obese and they're very unhealthy, they can make that personal decision to stay at home. They can make that personal decision to be vaccinated, right? But for me, if I'm very healthy and I'm in good shape, my chances of dying from this are like 0.0001. I've got a higher chance of getting myocarditis from this shot than I have of actually dying from any of these diseases.
All right. Okay, Thomas, thanks for your call. Really appreciate it. All right, let's go to another call before we go to break. Let's go to Mark in Ottawa. Mark, what are your thoughts?
Hey, thanks, Derek.
Oh, you're welcome.
Question number one.
Yeah, domestic travel. Should we have national vaccine standards for domestic travel? And I would say, air travel in particular.
Air travel, you know what? If you don't want to travel by air, it's a private industry, right? Air Canada. But if you don't want to have your shot, then guess what? You can drive to Vancouver.
Okay, so we know where you stand there. So yes to vaccine standards for domestic travel. Where do you land on the issue of new and increased taxes for the wealthy? Because this is something that, I believe you have to have some balance, right? We talked about this with Professor Ian Lee a little bit earlier on in the week, and he actually, David, can we go to that clip very quickly, and then I'll come back to you in a moment, Mark. But this is Ian Lee's advice to the new PM on economy.
So what the new prime minister, the next prime minister, could be Justin Trudeau, I don't know, I'm not predicting, should be focused like a laser beam. And if they want to say, well, that's all very nice, what does that mean? Well, I would say...
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
When you're online, Rogers TV on YouTube shares news and events from your community, like messages from local leaders, updates on the latest health news, local business presenting their new offerings, and how our local communities are working their way through these unprecedented times. Visit and subscribe to Rogers TV on YouTube for the latest local information.
I'm Mallory, and I was walking home one night when an impaired driver hit me. He had been overserved in 2 bars before getting behind the wheel. If the servers would have called him a cab instead of serving him more alcohol, my life would be the same as what it used to be. I think servers play the biggest role in keeping us safe because it's up to them what state the person's in when they leave. Refusing service isn't personal, it's the law.
Hi, I'm Harriet Clooney. Come check out my show, Scrap Cooking, where I'm going to show you how to use the bits and bobs, the ends, pieces of things that you might otherwise throw in the compost. I'm going to show you how to turn them into something delicious.
This is Rogers TV Ottawa.
Ya na na na, ya na 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 na, ya na 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 na, ya na na na, ya na 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 na, ya na 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 na, ya na ya na. Ya na na na, ya na 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 na, ya na ya na, ya na na na, ya na na ya na na na, ya na na. Welcome. Good morning. Gemar Chatima Tova. We'll begin our services this morning with Hamelech, page 69. Page 69, 5 lines down the page.
Hamelech Yoshev Al Kisei Ram Venisa Shochenat Maram V'kadoshema V'chatu Rananu Tzadikim Badonai Laishrim Navatila B'fi Shirim Titromam Uvdirei Tzadikim Titbarach Uvishon Chasidim Titgadash Uvakerev Kedoshim Titalal Uvmakalot Revivot Amacha Beit Yisrael Lehodot lehalel leshabech lefaer leromem lehader levarech lelkoles al kol divrei shirot v'tishbachot David ben Yishai Abdecha Meshichecha Yishtabach Shimacha Lahad Malkeinu Hawel HaMelech HaGadol Brachot V'adot Me'atavi Ad Olam Baruch Ata Adonai El Melech Gadol B'Tishbachot El Adot Ananiflaot Habocher B'Shirei Zimra Melech Elchei Ha'olamim.
Okay, 70 at the bottom.
Yitgadal v'kadash Shemei Rabbah B'yamad yivra kirutei V'yamlich malchutei B'chayei chon Uv'yomei chon Uv'chayei Rechol Beit Yisrael Ba'gala Uv'izman kariv V'meru Amen Yeshmei Rabbah Mevorach Le'olam Olam Maya Yitbarach v'yishtabav v'yitpar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shmei dekudesha b'richu le'ela le'ela mikol berchata v'shirata tush berchata v'nechamata da'amiram b'yama v'yimaru Amen. Baruch et Adonai HaMevorach
Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed
Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam poteach lanu sharesh rachamim umeir einei mechakim l'slichato yotzer or uverech oshech oseh shalom uverech hakol or olam be'ozer chaim oro me'ovel amar vayehi.
We're seated, page 72.
Hameir la'aretz v'ledrim alev rachamim. El Baruch Titbarach Adonai Eloheinu al shevet ma'aseh yadecha ve'al morei or she'asita yirucha selah. Page 75. Titbarach tzureinu mahalkeinu Kulam ahuvim, kulam beruim, kulam gibarim, v'kulam osim b'maratzon konam, v'kulam porchim epihem, b'kedushav tara, b'shira uvizimra, morchim b'shabachim, uvarim u'maritzim u'makdishim u'mamlichim. Et Shem Hoel HaMelech HaGadol HaGibor V'Nera Kadosh Hu V'Kulam Mekablim Aleihem O Malchut Shemayim Zeh Mizeh V'Notnim Reshut Zeh Lazeh Le'akdish Yotzam Banach HaRuah B'Safa V'Ravim HaKedusha Kulam Kecharonim V'Yomrim B'Irah Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzivot, Meloch ol Haaretz Kivodo. Va'ofanim b'achayot HaKodesh, B'rash Gadol, Minasim Luat Serafim, Lumatam Mishabachim, V'yomrim, Baruch Kivod Adonai, Mimkomo, Le'el Baruch Numeiteinu, L'machayim Zuriyim. Ham Chadesh b'tuvo b'choyam tamid Maseh v'reishit kamur le'aserim gedolim ki le'olam chazdo or chadash al Zion ta'ir v'nizkechu l'nemero Baruch atah Adonai yotzer ha'meorot Avarav tanu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'avienu l'shalom erba kamfot haaretz v'tolichenu kamiot li'artzenu ki el poel yeshuatata uvana v'charta mikolam v'lashon v'keraftanu l'shimcha hagadol sela be'emet l'hodot l'cha yechecha be'ava Baruch atah Adonai habocher be'amo Yisrael be'ahava Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Li'olam Vahed V'yavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha uv'chol nafshecha uv'chol meyodecha v'hayu hadvarim oele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantan levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shiftecha b'veitecha uv'lektecha b'derech u'shabgecha uv'kumecha u'shatam leot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot beinenecha u'chtatam al mezuzot beitecha u'v'hisharecha v'yam Vayomer Adonai el Moshe lemor daber el bnei Yisrael ve'amarta alehem ve'asu lahem tzitzit al kanfei bigdehem ledorotav ve'natnu al tzitzit hakanaf betil techelet vayelachem letzitzit uritem oto Uschartem et komisod Adonai, vasitem otam, velo tateru, acharei levavchem, ve'acharei enechem, asher atem zonim achareihem, leman tizkeru, vasitem et komisotai, vitem kadoshim lelechem, ani Adonai elechem. Asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem le'Elohim ani Adonai Elechem emet v'yatzif. V'dor v'yor kayam shua kayam v'kisar nachon u'malchut tov v'nemetul kayamet. Emet shato Adonai Eloheinu v'le'avoteinu malkeinu melech avoteinu goleinu goel avoteinu yotzeinu yisur yishuateinu podeinu matzilenu melam shemecha ein Elohim zulatecha Ezrat avoteinu atahu me'olam magin Mashiach. Ram Venisan. Teila lelelyan baruch u'varach Moshe Miriam uvnei Yisrael lechanu chira b'simcha rabba v'emru chulam michamocha belim Adonai mikamocha nedar b'kodesh norati lot osef elem Shira chadasha, shibchu gilim shechad al satayam, yachad kulam hodu, vimlichu v'yameru.
Adonai imlach le'olam va'ed. We rise.
Adonai imlach le'olam va'ed. Tzur Yisroel, kumav ezrat Yisroel, uvdeichinu mecha, Yehuda v'Yisroel. Go aleinu Adonai tzavot shemo kadosh Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Ga'al Yisrael.
Amen. We turn ahead to page 252. Page 252 for the Hechi Kedusha. We begin the Amidah aloud together. Page 252. The ark is open.
Ki v'shem Adonai ekra havo gadol Eloheinu Adonai svatai tifta ufi yagiti latecha Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avoteinu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Oel Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanara El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei HaKol V'Zocher Chazei Avot Umevi Goel Livnei V'Nehem L'man Shemo B'Ahava Misad chachamim unevonim umilemet ad mevinim eftecha bid v'tfila uv'tachanunin lechanot uchanein pnei melech malei rachamim mochel v'soleach lavanim.
The ark is closed, remain standing. 253.
Zachrenu lechayim melech hafetz b'chayim b'katvenu b'sefer hachayim limancha Elohim echayim melech ozer u'moshia u'magen Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai Mechayei Meitim Atah Rav Lehoshia Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed Mechayei Meitim Berachamim Rabim Sohomech Noflim Berofech Olim Umatir Asurim Umekayim Emunato Lishenei Afar Umekayim Emunato Lishenei Afar Michamocha Bal Gevurat Umido Melach Melech Memit Umechaye Umatzmiach Yeshua Michamocha Arachamim Zocher Yetzurav L'chaim Berachamim V'neman Ata L'chayot Meitim Baruch Ata Adonai Mechayei HaMeitim Imloch Adonai Le'olam Elohai Etzion Ledor Vador Hallelujah Ve'ata Kadosh Yosef Yosef Tehillah Tehillah Yisrael.
The ark is open as we turn to page 256.
Uvechein lecha kol yaktiru lel orech din. Levachein levavot biyom din. Legole amukot ba'adin.
Ledover mesharim biyom din. Legedeyot ba'adin.
Ledover mesharim biyom din. Legedeot ba'adin.
Levativ yosech chesed biyom din. Lezocher brito ba'adin.
Levatik v'yosech chesed biyom din. Lezocher brito ba'adin.
Lechomer masa biyom din. Letechosa ba'adin.
Lechomer masav biyom din. Letaher chosav ba'adin.
Leyoter machashavo biyom din. Lechovesh kaso ba'adin.
Liyodea makashavot biyom din. Lechoves kaso ba'adin.
Lechoves tzedakah b'yom din, l'machavanot ba'adin.
Lechoves tzedakot b'yom adin, l'mochel avonot ba'adin.
L'narati lo b'yom din, l'solel ha'musa ba'adin.
L'narati lo b'yom din, l'solech lamusav ba'adin.
L'yaneh l'korah b'yom din, l'foel rachama ba'adin.
Leonel l'korav b'yom din, l'foel rachamav ba'adin.
L'sofeni sarah b'yom din, l'koneh v'adav ba'adin.
L'tzofeni starot b'yom adin, l'koneh avadav ba'adin.
L'rachem ama b'yom din, l'shomer avav ba'adin.
L'rachem amo b'yom din, l'shomer avav ba'adin, l'tomech temivav b'yom din.
Ark is closed, remain standing for the Kedusha.
Uvecheinu l'chatele kedusha ki ata Eloheinu melch mochel v'soleya naharitzecha v'nakdishcha kisotzia saharfei kodesh hamakdishim shimcha b'kodesh Kakatuv Hayad Neviyecha V'karazeh Elzeh V'yamar Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh Adonai Tzevaot Melech Kol Haaretz Mishahar tav shoalim zeh zeh aye mekomo leumatam baruch yomeru baruch kevod Adonai mimkomo hu yifem barachamim. V'yachon amham yachadim shemo erev avoker b'choyam tamid pamayim be'ava shema omerim shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Hu Eloheinu Hu Avinu Hu Malkeinu, Hu Moshienu, Hu Yashmienu, Baruch Haba Sheni Leinu Kochai, Liot Lachem Le'Elohim, Ani Adonai Elohechem, Adir Adirenu, Adonai Adonai Adir Shimcha B'chol Haaretz, Ve'ya Adonai L'melech Al Kol Haaretz, Bayom hahu yena echad u'shemo echad u'dvrei kodsecha katuv le'mor yimloch Adonai le'olam Elohai Zion le'dor v'dor hallelujah le'dor v'dor nagi golecha Ulenetzach nitzachim kedushatcha nagdish v'shivchacha Eloheinu mipinu le'mush le'olam bo'ed ki el melech gadol v'kadosh ata.
And we continue with the silent Amidah, turning back to page 215. Page 215, we continue silently through page 221. 215 to 221.
Sefer Chaim Beracha V'Shalom U'Farnasa Tova Nizacher V'Nikateh Lefanecha Anachnu B'Chol Amecha Beit Yisrael L'chaim tovim, u'l'shalom. Baruch ata Adonai, oseh ha'shalom.
Amen. May be seated for just a moment for a quick public service announcement. Usually we say that only God is goleh hanistarot, that only God can hear those things that are hidden. To pull back the curtain a little bit about how services operate here over the live stream, there are 3 or 4 different ways for the audio to work, of which only one should be working at any given time. So the way the system usually runs is that what someone hears over the live stream is only what is coming out of the microphones here in the room. If that does not work, which at the moment we're trying to fix, there are other microphones in the room that allow people to still hear what is happening in the room, but it is not direct from the audio. Which brings me to the revealing that which is hidden, which is, since it is not coming directly from the microphone, if you are talking, they can hear you. Okay? So if you are talking during my sermon, they can hear you. If you are talking while the service leader is leading the service, they can hear you doing that too. So unless the things that you are saying are things you want people to be hearing at home, I encourage you to be thoughtful about the chatting that is going on in shul. And if that is not the case, for the people at home, you are going to have the most authentic experience of being at shul on the high holidays, because you're going to hear everybody talking while you're trying to do your davening from home. But let's try to keep the former more so than the latter. But I just want to give everyone a heads up that is the current audio system that we're using. It may change over the course of the morning, but we're glad that it exists to allow us to still provide the live stream as we are. And Rogers is still going great, so thanks, Rogers. So page 271, we rise for Avinu Malkeinu as the ark is opened.
Avinu Malkeinu, Salach L'Chol Avonoteinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Mechever Pesheinu V'Chotatenu Mineged Einecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Achazirenu B'Tshuva Shlema Lefanecha.
Avinu Malkeinu, Achazirenu B'Tshuva Shlema Lefanecha.
Avinu Malkeinu, Shalach Rufuah Shlema L'Cholei Amecha.
Avinu Malkeinu, Shalach Rufuah Shlema L'Cholei Amecha.
Avinu Malkeinu, Zachrenu B'Zikaron Tov Lefanecha.
Avinu Malkeinu, Zachrenu B'Zikaron Tov Lefanecha.
Avinu Malkeinu, Kodvenu B'Sefer Chaim Tovim.
Avinu Malkeinu, Kodvenu B'Sefer Chaim Tovim.
Avinu Malkeinu, Kodvenu B'Sefer Geula V'Yeshua.
Avinu Malkeinu, Malkeinu Kodvenu Sefer Gulav Yeshua.
Avinu Malkeinu Kodvenu B'Sefer Parnasah V'Chalkala.
Avinu Malkeinu Kodvenu Sefer Parnasah V'Chalkala.
Avinu Malkeinu Kodvenu B'Sefer Zechuya.
Avinu Malkeinu Kodvenu Sefer Zechuya.
Avinu Malkeinu Kodvenu B'Sefer Slicha Umechila.
Avinu Malkeinu Kodvenu Sefer Slicha Umechila.
Avinu Malkeinu Asmachlan Yeshua B'Karov. Avinu Malkeinu Aseh Lemancha Im Lo Lemanenu. Avinu Malkeinu Chanenu Vanenu. Avinu Malkeinu Chanenu Vanenu Ki Ein Banu Masin. Aseh Imanu Tzedakah V'Chesed. Aseh Imanu Tzedakah V'Chesed V'Hoshienu.
The ark is closed. You remain standing for the full Kaddish.
Yitgadal v'kadash shemei Rabba B'yamad yivra kirutei v'yamechokte b'chaychon uvyamechon uv'chaychon Beit Yisrael Ba'agala uvizman kariv imru Amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mevorah le'olam 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 Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbar v'yitron v'naseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei d'gudasha B'richu le'ila le'ila miko b'chata v'shirata tush b'chata v'nachmata d'amiram b'yalma v'imeru.
Amen.
Titgabel tzotanu v'ton l'cho Yisrael kadam uvon d'ishmai v'imru. Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemai v'chaim aleinu v'ko Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al ko Yisrael v'imeru.
Amen. The service are taking the Torah from the ark, page 274.
Is it me? Yep. Okay. Ein kamocha belim Adonai ben kemasecha malchutecha malchut
kol olamim umemshaltecha bechol dor v'ador. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai imlach le'olam va'ed. Adonai oz le'amo yiten. Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. Avarachamim heitiva b'rzoncha et Zion. Tivnech omot Yerushalayim. Ki v'lecha levad batachnu. Melech el ram v'nitza Adon olamim. Vayehi bin Aharon vayomer Moshe Kuma Adonai ve'achutu oivecha ve'anusu misanecha mipanecha ki mitzion teisei Torah ki mitzion teisei Torah
Matan Torah Lemor Israel Bikdu Shato.
275 at the top.
Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum Bechadut, Erech Apayim, Verav Chesed Be'emet, Notzeh Chesed L'Alafim, Noseh Avon V'Fesha, Bechata V'Nakeh. Chesed l'alafim, noseh avon v'fesha, v'chata v'nakeh. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum B'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'rav Chesed Be'emet, Notzeh Chesed l'alafim, Noseh avon v'fesha, v'chata v'nakeh.
V'nakeh.
Yirotoni b'fri v'goni v'fanecha, Adonai tzuri v'go'ali. V'ani tefilati, Lecha Adonai et ratzon, Elohim b'rav chasdecha, Aneni, Aneni, v'emet yishecha. V'ani tefilati, Lecha Adonai et ratzon, Elohim b'rav chasdecha, Aneni, Aneni, b'emet yishecha. V'ani tefilati, Lecha Adonai
Slow Shema 276 in the middle of the page. kadosh, ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. May be seated. Yishur koach to Stephen Kimmel for leading us in a beautiful Shacharit and Torah service this morning. The Torah reading for this morning is found on page 278. Page 278. We'd like to invite all those with Aliyot this morning to please make their way to the front so they're ready to go. Page 278 as we call the first Aliyah.
Yazor again, Vershil, Chosim Bov and Amar. Amen. Hakol Havagodol, Hinug no Kavod Torah. Kohen Krava Yamod Chaim ben David, Veliba HaKohen. Baruch Shanatan Torah Le'am Yisrael B'Kedushato. Vatem Advikim Adonai Elechem, Chaim Kulchem Hayom.
Baruch et Adonai Hamvorach. Baruch Adonai Hamvorach. Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe acharei mot shnei bnei Aharon b'korvotam lifnei Adonai vayamutu. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe daber el Aharon achicha v'al yavo b'chol eit el HaKodesh mi beit laparochet el pnei hakaporet asher al ha'aron v'lo yamut ki be'anan era'eh al hakaporet bezot yavo Aaron el hakodesh befar ben bakar lechatat ve'ayil le'olah ketonet bad kodesh yilbash u'michnasei vad yiyu al psaro uvavneit bad yachor uvmitznefet bad yitznov bigdei kodesh heim v'rachatz b'mayim et psaro uvesham umeit adat b'nei Yisrael yikach shnei se'irizim echad lechatat ve'ayil echad le'olah v'hikriv Aaron et parachatat asher lo v'chiper ba'ado uvad beito.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'hayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Ya'alon David ben Bov Yachazai Halevi Vibrandel Levi Sheni.
Baruch es Adonai Havorach. Baruch Adonai Baruch Adonai Marim Olavot. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher charbuvenu mikol ha'amim no'etalunu esterusot Baruch atah Adonai no'esan ha'torah.
ולקח את שני הסירים והעמיד אותם לפני אדוני פתח אוהל מועד ונתן אהרון על שני הסירים גורלות גורל אחד לאדוני וגורל אחד לעזאזל והקריב אהרון את השעיר אשר עלה עליו הגורל לאדוני ועשהו חטאת והשעיר אשר עלה עליו הגורל לעזאזל יעמוד חי לפני אדוני לכפר עליו לשלח אותו לעזאזל המדברה והקריב אהרון את פר החטאת אשר לו וכיפר בעדו ועד ביתו ושחט את פר החטאת אשר לו.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נוסלנו את תורת האמת וחיים אורנו תבשכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נויסן התורה.
אמן.
תעמוד חווה בת ישראל ושרה לאה שלישי.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamvarach. Baruch Adonai hamvarach leolam vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam. Asher bacharvanu mikol ha'amim v'noten lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
ולקח מלוא המחתה כחלי אש מעל המזבח מלפני אדוני ומלוא חופניו קטורת סמים דקה והביא מבית לפרוכת ונתן את הקטורת על האש לפני אדוני וכיסה ענן הקטורת את הכפורת אשר על העדות ולא ימות ולקח מדם הפר והיזב אצבעו על פני הכפורת קדמה ולפני הכפורת יזר 7 פעמים מן הדם באצבעו ושחט את שעיר החטאת אשר לם והביא את דמו אל מבית לפרוכת ועשה את דמו כאשר עשה לדם הפר והיזה אותו על הכפורת ולפני הכפורת וכיפר על הקודש מטומאות בני ישראל ומפשעיהם לחוכתותם וכן יעשה לאוהל מועד השוכן איתם בתוך טומאתם וכל אדם לא יהיה באוהל מועד בבוא לכפר בקודש עד צאתו v'chiper ba'ado v'ad beito, uva'ad kol kahal Yisrael. V'yatza el hamizbeach, asher lifnei Adonai, v'chiper alav, v'lakach midam hapar, umidam hasayir, v'nata, no. Yeah, it should have stopped. V'chiper, uva'ad kol kahal Yisrael.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Ya'amod Yonatan Yosef ben Avraham v'Sara Revi'i.
Baruchu et Adonai hamborach. Baruch Adonai hamborach leolam va'ed. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch ata Adonai noten haTorah.
V'yatza el hamizbeach, asher lifnei Adonai v'chiper alav. V'lakach midam hapar, umidam hasayir, v'natan al karnot hamizbeach saviv. V'hiza alav min adam, v'etzba'o sheva pamim, v'tiharo v'kicho mitumot b'nei Yisrael. V'chila michaper et hakodesh, v'et ohel moed, v'et hamizbeach, v'hikriv et asayir hachai. V'samach Aharon et shtei yadav al rosh hasayir hachai. V'hitvada alav et kol avonot b'nei Yisrael, v'et kol pishehem l'chol chatotam. V'natan otam al rosh hasayir, v'shilach b'yad ishiti hamidbara. V'nasa hasayir alav, et kol avonotam el eretz gzeira, v'shilach et asayir bamidbar. Uva Aharon Elohel moed, ufashat et bigdei habad, asher lavash bevo'o el hakodesh, v'hinicham sham. V'rachas et psaro b'mayim b'makom kadosh, v'lavash et begadav. V'yatsa v'asa et olato v'et olatam. V'chiper ba'ado uvad ha'am.
Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch ata Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Ya'amod Eden Saria bat Abraham. Ta'amod Eden Saria bat Abraham Chamishi.
Beratu edat amvora.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Adonai.
Berat Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bahapanu melech hayim v'natan lanu et Torato Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Ve'et chelef hachatat yaktir hamizbecha v'hamshaleach et asayir lazazel yichabes begadav v'rachas psaro b'mayim v'acharechen yavo el hamachaneh ve'et har hachatat ve'et seir hachatat asher huva et amam lechaper b'kodesh yotzi amechutz v'machaneh v'sarfu v'ayesh et orotam v'psaram v'et pirsham v'hasoref otam yichabes begadav v'rachas et psaro b'mayim v'acharechen yavo el hamachaneh v'hayta lachem lechukat olam v'chodesh hashvi be'asor lachodesh ta'anu et nafshotechem v'chol melacha lo tasu ha'ezrach v'hager hagar b'tochechem ki v'yom hazeh yechaper alechem l'taher etchem mikol chatotechem lifnei Adonai titharu.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah ameh v'chaya olam natan v'chayanu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Ya'amod Yaakov ben Abraham Shishi.
Baruchu Adonai Amborach. Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Boed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Shabbat Shabbaton hilachem v'initem et nafshotechem chukat olam v'chiper hakohen asher yimsach oto v'asher yimaleh et yado l'chahen tachat aviv v'lavash et bigdei abad bigdei hakodesh v'chiper et mikdash hakodesh v'et ohel moed v'et ohel moed v'et hamizbeach yechaper v'al hakohanim v'al kol am hakahal yechaper v'hayta zot lachem l'chukat olam l'chaper al bnei Yisrael mikol chatotam achat b'shana v'yas kasher tziva Adonai et Moshe.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. We rise for the half Kaddish.
Yitgadav Yitkadash Merabah Yoma Dibra Kirutei V'yamlich Malchutei B'chayechon V'yamechon V'chayidecho Beit Yisrael Bagala V'zman Kari V'yamru Amen Yishmei Rabba Yitbarak V'yistabach V'yitkar V'yitramam V'yitnaseh V'yitadar V'yitalev V'yitala Shemei Kurusha V'yichu Le'ela, le'ela, mikol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran ve'alma, v'imru, amen.
Ya'amod, Shalom ben Yisrael, Hagba Sefer Sheni, Ya'amod Yisrael ben Abraham, Galila Sefer Rishon. Ya'amod Naphtali Hertz ben Zechariah v'liba Malka Acharon.
May be seated.
Baruch Adonai Amvarach. Baruch Adonai Varach Le'olam Voed. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam. Asher b'charbanu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Uva esar lachodesh hashvi hazeh mikra kodesh yelachem v'initem et nafshotechem kol melacha lo tasu v'hipravtem ola l'Adonai reach nichoach par ben bakar echad ayil echad fasim b'nei shana shiva tmimim yiyu lachem umin chatam solet lulav hashamen shlosha esronim lapar shnei esronim la'ayil ha'echad Isaron, Isaron, lakeves ha'echad, l'shivat hakvasim, sirizim echad chatat, milvad chatat hakipurim v'olat hatamid, umin chatav v'niskehem.
Baruch Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam, Asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam netapa tochenu. Baruch Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Ya'amod Yitzchak ben Shlomo, Hagba Sefer Sheni, Ta'amod Michal Golda bat David Leib, Galila Sefer Sheni.
We rise as the second Sefer Torah is lifted and tied. Marasha Kehilat Yaakov, Marasha Kehilat Yaakov, Marasha Kehilat Yaakov, Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe. At this time, we'll do a Mishaber for Choliim, a prayer for those in need of healing. If you have any additional names to add to those already on our list, please let me know when I pause. Mishaberach Aboteinu Avraham Yitzhak Yaakov Sarah Kachavya Hu Yavar Evra Pet HaCholim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimel Rachamim Aleim Lachlimam Avatam Chatikam Mechayotam Yishach Lemer Refuah Shlema L'chol Evreim Gedeim Tov Shorcha Yisrael Refuah Denever Shuar Daguv Yamadim Hum Lizokor Frakvar Labo Hashta Bagalai Zman Kariv Ben Amar Amen. May be seated. A few brief announcements. First of all, Yishur Koach once again to Stephen Kimmel for leading us in Shachri, the Torah service, and serving as Gabbai Rishon. Yishur Koach to Joe Levitan for another beautiful Torah reading. Yishur Koach to Alan Baker for serving as our Gabbai Sheni. And to everyone who had an Aliyah this morning, and Yishur Koach in advance to Cantor Green, who'll be leading us, and I know what will be a wonderful Musaf service because he's already done it once so far. Just a few other quick announcements. All afternoon, for anyone who would like, there are study sheets will be available in the small tent for people who'd like to do some learning this afternoon in between the morning service and the evening service. At 4:30 this afternoon, there's a meditative service with Rabbi Zucker. At 5 o'clock, there'll be a Yisker service together with me that's open to the community or people who may not want to come in a larger audience but are interested in coming this afternoon for a smaller service. At 5:45 will be Mincha, at 6:45 will be Nila, and about 8:02 will be the final shofar blast. So that's the schedule for the remainder of today. Just a reminder that this Sunday is our Youth Town Hall, an opportunity for our children to be able to get together and for their parents to be able to share a little bit about what they're interested in for their children, and for us to speak a little bit about the amazing youth programming we have in store for this year. Also, surprisingly, after Yom Kippur this year comes Sukkot. And so we will have the opportunity to come together for a number of outstanding Sukkot programs. The one that I want to bring to your attention first is going to be next Wednesday. Following services at 9 a.m. at 11:45, there will be what we're calling Sukkah, Scotch, and Zionism. So it's like three of our favorite things. So we have a guest joining us from the Israeli Embassy who will be joining us for an informal conversation about Israel and what's happening in Israel. And we'll also be bringing in not just the scotch we have sitting in the locker, but new scotches to be able to enjoy as part of that conversation. So whether you join us for services at 9 or just at 11:45 in the Sukkah, all are welcome to join us at that time. And please keep an eye out at the synagogue mailings for all of the announcements along the way. With that being said, in just a moment, we'll continue with the Isker service, but I have a few words to share before. You never know when you're going to hear something that truly resonates with you, with the obvious exception of my sermons. While my family and I traveled out west this summer, we made a point to include indigenous content as part of our vacation. In Jasper, we decided to go on a medicine walk with Matricia Brown, a First Nations Cree educator. I imagined that she would take us into the woods, though she did just the opposite, leading us largely down the city streets. She pointed to two different lawns. One was well-groomed with imported grass, and the other had weeds scattered throughout. What she brought to our attention was that in the fact of the immense heat that they're experiencing that summer, the well-groomed lawn was mostly brown, while the lawn that was scattered with what many would call weeds was entirely green. She pointed out all the random naturally growing plants and called the dandelion the perfect plant. And then she said the line that still sticks with me. It's only a weed if you don't see its value. Some of these weeds could provide the same amount of nutrition as anything you buy at Whole Foods. She showed us how to turn some leaves into medicinal salves and allowed us to taste others as well. It's only a weed if you don't see its value. While she was obviously speaking literally, I couldn't help but reflect on this sentiment as it translates to our internal lives. There are parts of us with which we all struggle. Senses of loss, anger, frustration, disappointment. Times that we look at ourselves and we wish we were different. That parts of us could be changed. I was thinking about this when I found the following conversation from John Riddell posted to his Facebook page that he calls, "Hey God, hey John." And it begins. "Hey God, hello my love. I'm falling apart. Can you put me back together?" "I would rather not." "Why?" "Because you aren't a puzzle." "What about all the pieces of my life that are falling down onto the ground?" "Let them stay there for a while. They fell off for a reason. Take some time and decide if you need any of those pieces back." "You don't understand. I'm breaking down." "No, you don't understand. You are breaking through. What you're feeling are just growing pains. You're shedding the things and the people in your life that are holding you back. You aren't falling apart. You're falling into place. Relax. Take some deep breaths and allow those things you don't need anymore to fall off of you. Quit holding on to the pieces that don't fit you anymore. Let them fall off. Let them go. Once I start doing that, what will be left of me? Only the very best pieces of you. I'm scared of changing. I keep telling you, you aren't changing. You are becoming. Becoming who? Becoming who I created you to be. A person of light and love and charity and hope and courage and joy and mercy and grace and compassion. I made you for more than the shallow pieces you have decided to adorn yourself with, that you cling to with such greed and fear. Let those things fall off of you. I love you. Don't change. Become. Become who I made you to be. I'm going to keep telling you this until you remember it. There goes another piece. Yep, let it be. So I'm not broken? No, but you're breaking like the dawn. It's a new day. Become. The parts of ourselves that we struggle with, the parts of us that we wish weren't there, are exactly what makes us not only who we are, but who God made us to be. They may not be weeds to pick, but an amazing contribution to what makes each of us extraordinary. As we recite Yizkor today, we think about all the things we carry with us, the joyful memories, but also painful losses that endure. While we tend to want to focus on the beautiful blossoms that have grown in the aftermath of our loved one's death, it is worth remembering that the pain, the loss, the disappointment, and the anger are also there for a reason. It's only a weed if you don't see its value. These events, these moments in our lives have made us who we are, which is exactly who the Almighty wishes us to be. On these high holy days, let us not only use it as a time to repair and change, But perhaps even more importantly, use it as a time for acceptance and love of ourselves, weeds and all. For we are not broken. We are instead breaking like the dawn. It's a new day, the perfect day to be you. Shana Tova. Our service continues with Yizkor, which is found in our Masorim on page 290 as we rise.
Adam vateidaehu ben enosh vatechashveihu Adam lehevel dama yamav ketzel over בבוקר יציץ וחלף, לערב ימולל ויבש. למנות ימינו כן נודע ונביא, לבב חוכמה.
On this solemn day, we each make judgments about the quality of our life. We re-examine our deeds and relationships with our community and with others. We express our yearnings for a new year, a new beginning, a year during which we commit ourselves to work towards bringing health and peace to all. We long for a year when individually and communally we shall strive to live in a way that is more reflective of the ideals that we cherish. Now, in the midst of looking at our life and assessing its quality, we pause to reflect and to remember and to dedicate ourselves anew.
שיוויתי אדוני לנגדי תמיד, כי מימיני בא למות. לכן שמח ליבי ויגל כבודי, אף בשרי ישכון לבטח.
The deaths of those we now remember left holes in our lives, but we're grateful for the gift of their lives, and we are strengthened by the blessings that they left us and the precious memories that comfort and sustain us as we recall them this day. The Yizkor prayers are found on page 291.
יזכור אלוהים את נשמתו.
May God remember the souls of our friends, members of this holy congregation, who have gone to their eternal home. May their souls be bound up in the bond of life. May these moments of meditation strengthen the ties that link us to their memory. May they rest in peace forever in God's presence. Amen.
Amen.
The exalted, compassionate God, comfort the bereaved families of this congregation. Help us to perpetuate everything that was worthy in the lives of those no longer with us, whom we remember this day. May their memory endure as a blessing, and let us say,
Amen.
Amen. In memory of the 6 million.
מלא רחמים שוכן במרומים המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים לנשמות כל אחינו בני ישראל שנטבחו בשואה, אנשים, נשים וטף, שנחנקו ושנשרפו ושנהרגו, שמסרו את נפשם על קידוש השם. בגן עדן תהי מנוחתם. אנא בעל הרחמים, הסתירם בשאת כנפיך לעולמים, וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם. אדוני הוא נחלתם, וינוחו בשלום על משכבותיהם. ונאמר אמן.
The Almighty for Israel, soldiers and martyrs, on page 6 in the Yizkor book. Exalted, compassionate God, Almighty Rachamim, grant perfect peace among the holy and the pure in your sheltering presence. To the souls of the soldiers of the Israel Defense Forces, who gave their lives for the sanctity of your name, the people and the land, and died a death of valor in the wars of Israel, and the souls of those killed in terror attacks. For we pray on their behalf that paradise be their resting place. Therefore, Master of mercy, shelter them in your presence forever. May their souls be bound up in the bonds of life. God is their inheritance, and may they rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. In memory of all those we remember today, page 293.
El malei rachamim, shochein bam romim, hametzei menucha menucha nechona, תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים לנשמות כל אלה שהזכרנו היום לברכה, שהלכו לעולמם. בגן עדן, בגן עדן, בגן עדן תהי מנוחתם. לכן בעל הרחמים, הסתירם בשאת כנפיך לעולמים. וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם. אדוני הוא נחלתם, וינוחו בשלום על משכבותיהם. ונאמר
Psalm 23.
מזמור לדוד אדוני יוסף. Di shanta v'shemen roshi, di shanta v'shemen roshi, di shanta v'shemen roshi, kosi revaya.